Well, I have a pretty straightforward proposition that I wanted to put out there, and Clay and I are going to dive into it together here in a moment. And that is that anyone who says and really believes that the January 6th riot is an insurrection is an idiot. I actually wrote about this. That's the title of the piece I have at bucksexton.com. I had to get this out there because I am so sick of the insanity and the stupidity around this. And it's also very intentional from the left. They're using this, the labeling of as many conservatives as possible as insurrectionists and extremists. And it doesn't matter if you were there, by the way. Doesn't matter if you had anything to do with this, whether you support it, what happened on January 6th or not, whether you condemned it right away, guilt by association of conservatism, and therefore justifying the oppressive measures taken against you is the whole plan. I mean, what level of oppression are we talking about here? What level of stupidity, actually, are they willing to say on TV about the so-called insurrection? Earlier this week, we had someone who on MSNBC said it was worse than 9/11. Here we go. Here's another person. This is Steve Schmidt. This guy actually was running the McCain campaign years ago, and now he's a never Trump ideological mercenary, says whatever he has to say to be on TV and get the paycheck. But here he is telling everybody that the Capitol riot is worse than 9/11.
My friend Matthew Dowd, our friend, talked about this. He couldn't be more right. The 1/6 attack for the future of the country is a profoundly more dangerous event than the 9/11 attacks. And in the end, the 1/6 attacks are likely to kill a lot more Americans than were killed on the 9/11 attacks, which will include the casualties of the wars that lasted 20 years following it. We have had periods of political violence in this country, and I believe we're on the edge of another one, tragically. And we have to fight back against it at the ballot box.
Clay, the violent overthrow of the U.S. government would probably take more than bear spray and fire extinguishers. I mean, the most ominous weapon that they had on January 6th seems to be the spear that QAnon shaman had with a flag attached to it. And I understand his furry hat may be intimidating to people of Jerry Nadler's stature and courage, but let's be real here. This is completely outrageous. I mean, it's so insulting to say, not to compare it to 9/11 is Looney Tunes, to say it's worse than 9/11. But Clay, this is not a one-off narrative. This is what they're telling themselves because it's like they turn the dial to 11. They turn the crazy up so high that there must be some truth to it in the eyes of people listening. That's what they're hoping to do.
It's partly based on the journalists who are covering this, right? And those are the people that anger me more than the politicians who are clearly lying for their own benefit. I mean, comparing this to 9/11 is such an insult to anyone who lived through 9/11 at all. But, Buck, I want you to hear this Vice News coverage. You and I were sitting this back, I don't even remember, the last several days, and I was like, we got to manage to make sure that we hit some of these quotes, all right? This is a Vice News expose that came out. The headline is, reporters who survived the Capitol riot are still struggling. So I want to start with this question, Buck. Can you be considered a survivor when no one died? Like, I know we've expanded the term survivor, but no one who was a reporter died, right? So when every reporter survives something, are you really a survivor? Like, am I surviving this day, knock on wood, if I don't die today? Am I like a survivor of July the 9th and July the 10th? Like, when we define surviving predicated on something that everyone survived, with the exception, by the way, of the one woman who was shot that we still don't know who was shot. But this is where the storylines begin to get set. Reporters who survived the deadly Capitol riot. This is the headline.
Only deadly for Ashley Babbitt, just to be deadly for right. Ashley Babbitt.
Who was innocent, theoretically, unarmed, we know for sure. Unnecessarily shot? I think probably. But we don't know who shot her. We don't know the full story there. Okay, these are quotes from reporters who, quote, survived the insurrection. It's eerily back to normal. but sometimes it feels like one of those horror movies, like the end of Jaws. Everything feels copacetic on the beach, but you wonder if there's anything out there. That day, we weren't just observers, we were the targets. A lot of us reporters are having a tough time with this. Listen to this. Lisa Desjardins, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name or not, said, "I'm still not sleeping like I used to. I became an insomniac." Buck, this is madness. Listen to this guy, Matt Laszlo. "It's my office, the building I love most in the effing world. I used to call the Capitol my girlfriend. I've devoted 15 years of my GD life to that building." He started choking up. "Now, I don't want to be there." I mean, are these like we are hearing these quotes? And like, what in the world are we even considering when we have people like this giving quotes like these?
And let's not forget that we're talking about Vice, obviously. Now you've got a bunch of, oat milk drinkers from Park Slope, Brooklyn, who are just so left in all of their ideological proclivities, but they're fine with the riots that happened for months and months at a time, day in and day out, probably hundreds of them. These are the same people who will stand in front of an actual looting under the banner of BLM and say, this is no big deal. This is mostly kind of setting right. It's mostly peaceful. I will never forget I don't remember who the reporter was. And I want to say it might have been Don Lemon, but I can't remember now. There was a reporter at CNN who was standing with a literal conflagration, a burning building behind him saying, well, this is a mostly peaceful protest. Look, let's be very clear. By Democrat definition, the January 6th riot, it was not an insurrection, unless you really believe that a bunch of unarmed people who were taking selfies once they got inside. I know some of them assaulted officers on the outside, and I've said any law breaking should be prosecuted all along. But we shouldn't treat, throwing a paper bag full of, trash or whatever at cops or hitting them in the face as though it's the same thing as a bunch of guys who were armed and trying to overthrow the actual United States government, an act of treason or insurrection in this case. But we're not even operating in the same universe with the Democrats in this, Clay. They just formed the select committee this week, and Pelosi, who is the biggest liar on planet Earth, pretends like she's sad. She also, just so remembers, she pretended to be sad to bring the second impeachment proceeding. She was, "Oh, this is very solemn. I'm so upset. I'm crying."
But also, the insurrection argument is, I think we need to just keep hammering this, the idea. First of all, there are a lot of grandmothers that have been arrested. How many insurrections in American history, Buck, have been led by grandmas, unarmed? Not very many. I'm just gonna toss this out there that in general, grandmas who are unarmed have been relatively unsuccessful in overthrowing the government. And what happened here, if anything, and this is the real irony that I believe deserves to be explored more, is, remember, the New York Times fired their executive editor because Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas, wrote a piece saying, hey, we need more military presence to protect with all these riots going on. What happened as soon as the insurrection occurred? The New York Times said, where were all the officers? Where were all the security? They wouldn't allow them to be deployed. That's the real story here, is that we had gotten so used to no law enforcement being allowed to do their jobs during riots and protests and everything else that there was no one there to actually stop what were mostly people who just went inside and took photos and sort of paraded through. Again, the only casualty directly related to January 6th was Ashley Babbitt, and we still don't know anything about who shot her, about whether or not really that was justified force. They just kind of have covered that entire story up.
And yet, Nancy Pelosi has a select committee, and Democrat pundits go on TV and say it was worse than 9/11. And because of that kind of rhetoric, because of the lies that are being told, you have the actual QAnon shaman guy, Jacob Anthony Chansley. He's been in solitary confinement, held in prison now for 6 months because of what is effectively the charges are actually obstruction of an official government proceeding and trespass. That's it. He didn't threaten anybody. He didn't attack anybody. But they're holding him because he became such a visual symbol. And the judge who's holding him is claiming it's because he's an imminent threat to democracy should he be released. This one guy who had a bear hat, face paint, and a spear in his hands, and clearly has some
psychological issues.
Yes, I mean they're finally looking at that. This one guy is being held, and there are hundreds that they're prosecuting over this situation. You know, look, there was a grandma who was the first one. I think she just got probation. Yeah, because she trespassed on federal government property. She didn't actually do anything. I mean, you know,
which is, by the way, the vast majority of the people who were in the Capitol. Most of them were just trespassing, right? Like that's the overwhelming number that are being charged.
And this is why they had to keep pushing what should have been an obviously falsifiable lie if the media cared about the truth in the beginning, when they kept saying Officer Sicknick was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher or with a flagpole or whatever it was. That they needed to have that there. Because all of a sudden it was, hold on, you guys are killing cops? That's a whole other level. Shoving some officers, being violent with them, that's a crime. You got to pay the price for that. But murdering a cop, obviously, is a whole other level. The corporate Democrat media lied about that for months, and they still refuse to actually correct that narrative. They still say it was a lethal riot. Yeah, it was lethal for Ashley Babbitt. It was not lethal for anybody else. If you have a heart attack 3 days after you have to do some police work at a riot, that's not a violent riot murdering you. It's not the same thing.
And also, we do know violent riots. In Buffalo, they drove right over a line of police officers, right? What has always gotten me is this is the one incident in which I wish it hadn't happened. I wish people had been smart enough to know, hey, if you do this, you're going to be used as political propaganda by the Democrats for years, right? That's the truth. But we had months of riots going on all over this country, of people being arrested for assaulting police officers, for throwing Molotov cocktails, for burning buildings, and then being released with no charges whatsoever. And then the one thing that Republicans are involved in, right? I mean, I think that's fair to say. The one incident that Republicans are involved in an entire lawless 6 months is the one that the Democrats and the media will not let go of.